Thanks, Hallie. We try to keep these things reasonably brief. You can imagine when we have 350 folks going that it's a longer memorial service, but we're able today to close out the memorial service part of our program. And now we do what is a two-part pre-launch briefing. The first part is going to be done by Andy Wulfestieg, who has been on the console at Vandenberg for a number of launches, continues to play an active role in SpaceX launches, and really can give you the inside view on what's about to go down for you. Andy, come on up. Thank you.
Well, good morning. As Charlie said, my name is Andy Wulfestieg, and I'm just going to spend a couple minutes talking to you about what launch is like on the day of launch. I started off, like many people have talked about this morning, as a young child interested in launch. This was my first successful launch way back in the day. And I actually joined the Air Force in hopes of becoming an astronaut. 31 years ago last week, I graduated from Vandenberg here, and they didn't make me an astronaut. They made me a missileer and sent me to Montana, and I spent my first 5 years working with Minuteman missiles. But after that, I spent the majority of my 27 years on active duty working with space, working with satellites and rockets and the ground antennas that we use to communicate with satellites. And over the course of that time, I had a chance to work with, or work for, or meet over 40 astronauts that have flown in space, from some of the first Mercury astronauts through Gemini, Apollo, Shuttle, Soyuz, Dragon, and most recently, one of the astronauts that was on the Starliner mission last year. This included some of the first and last individuals to walk on the moon, the first female shuttle commander, the current record holder for the longest spacewalk, and the first person to complete both the Boston Marathon and the Malibu Triathlon while in space. And we can talk later about how she did the swimming. And some of the other luminaries in space. This photo is in front of us, SpaceX rocket with General J. Raymond, who's the first commander of the Space Force. I've had a chance to talk with Gene Kranz, who was one of the mission or flight directors at NASA. And I've even had a chance to rub elbows and talk for a few minutes with Elon Musk and Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. So after I retired from the Air Force, I've continued to work here just because I enjoy launch so much. And I'm also very active in the community, supporting scouting units and a local scuba diving club and a couple of car groups. And the hat I'm wearing this morning, I'm with the American Legion here in Lompoc as the current commander. But all told, I've spent, over the last, like I said, about 27 years, I've been involved in over 180 launches, both here and in Florida, and many of them working on console on that day of launch. And that's what I'm going to talk about, is what that is like. So, as Charlie said, it takes a million things to go right to make a launch work. And this picture is something that I got it from my backyard just earlier this year, and it is just magical when that happens, when it all comes together. But sometimes things don't go quite right, and so that's what we spend the majority of the time making sure on the day of launch that everything's going to go okay. And it takes a lot of people to do that, and a lot of people double and triple checking all the systems and the equipment and even the people to make sure that they're ready. For this launch, SpaceX has been working on the rocket for several weeks to refurbish it and get it ready. And over the last few days, they've finished connecting all the major components, putting the top on the rocket with all the payloads, along with this payload. There's 67 other satellites that are going up on this mission. This is the 26th launch of this rocket booster, the reused first stage of the rocket, which is tied for the most experienced launches from here at Vandenberg. The other one that launched 26 times was just earlier this month. So out in Florida, they've launched one 28 times. Since February of 2022, this particular booster has launched 5 missions for the National Reconnaissance Office, 1 for NASA, 1 for Germany, 3 other multi-user missions, and 15 batches of Starlink satellites. This booster last launched on the 31st of May, and it came back to Vandenberg just 12 days ago to get ready for this upcoming launch. And later today, while the rocket is still horizontal, they're going to roll it out to the launch pad, and from the hangar to the launch pad is only a couple hundred yards, and they're going to plug it all in, make sure the electrical connections are good, the liquid and gas lines are good, the comms all good, and then raise it up to vertical, all 230 feet of it. As soon as that's done, they start doing the double and triple checking to make sure that everything's going to be working right, that there are no leaks, and that they've got good connectivity with everything that they need to talk to in time for launch. About that same time, they're going to start clearing portions of the base to get it ready and make sure that nobody's in any of the hazardous areas closest to the launch site. And the range team that's in charge of the western range here at Vandenberg is going to start watching the sea space and the airspace and make sure that those areas are clear and that we don't have anybody in those closed areas. And one of the things they have to do is re-coordinate the schedules with Union Pacific Railroad, because the railroad runs right through the base, right past Launch Pad 4, where this rocket's going to be going from, and they were here first. So they have the right of way. Fortunately, they work pretty well with the base, and they're willing to hold their launches for a couple of minutes to let those launches get off the ground and not be in that closure area. Also of note, we've had obviously lots of people go through the base, but back in 1959, Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev rode those very same train rails, and at the time we made sure we had all our rockets and missiles standing out so he could see it as his train went by from LA to San Francisco. So on the day of launch, some of the engineers will start coming into their consoles about 3 to 4 hours in advance to start making sure that they start checking out their systems that they're supposed to and doing their detailed reviews of the rocket systems, making sure everything's in the proper configuration. And this includes any flight trajectory updates that have to be done to account for weather or wind or those kinds of things. At a couple of points during the rest of that countdown, that last 3 to 4 hours, the launch conductor or the chief engineer will poll all those subsystem experts and make sure that everything they're watching is good to go. And that launch director will make the decision on whether or not to proceed. They'll do a couple additional weather checks. They'll make sure, again, that those closed areas are clear and that there's nobody in the wrong places. This includes aircraft, ships. Sometimes they even have to evacuate the oil platforms off the coast. And one of the primary reasons we do that is for every launch, safety is paramount. While it's important to be a successful launch, we want to do it safely and not put the public or anybody else not involved in the launch at any significant risk. So there's a whole team of mathematicians and engineers that are assessing that risk right down to almost to T0 to make sure that those couple of pieces that come off the rocket that are designed to come off the rocket go where they're supposed to go and there's nobody there. And in the event of a bad day, if more pieces of the rocket come off, that again, those things are not going to put people in danger or aircraft in danger. This picture is me sitting a couple years ago on a launch as we were getting ready to launch a previous Falcon. And I was serving as a safety lead here, again, making sure that all those things were safe before we gave the go for launch. On the rocket itself, here we use two different kinds of safety systems. The legacy or heritage version requires some ground-based antennas to send a radio signal to the rocket to, if it strays off course or isn't going where it's supposed to, they'll actually send the command to blow it up. But SpaceX and some of the newer companies use something called autonomous flight safety, and they don't rely on the people on the ground to push that button anymore. It's all computers on the rocket that are monitoring all the systems and making sure that it's flying directly down the flight path it's supposed to go. And if it were to deviate, and we've had a few from here that do deviate, go the wrong direction, those computers will terminate the rocket and prevent it from, again, endangering anybody else that is on the ground or out there in the sea. So in the last couple hours of the launch, those final preps are made, the additional systems are brought online, and checked and tested, and they start fueling. And for a SpaceX rocket, that's the final about 35 minutes of the countdown. They'll start loading the fuel, more of the automated systems will start taking over, and they'll start filling up those tanks. For a Falcon 9 rocket, that's over 800,000 pounds of supercooled liquid oxygen, and nearly 340,000 pounds of rocket propellant 1, which, or RP1 as we call it, which is just a highly refined kerosene. And as long as all that gets into the rocket safely and we come up in the final 90 seconds or so, that's when we'll get the final go for launch calls. And the computers will start taking over at that point. And those last few seconds, the computers are in charge. They're watching everything. They're much faster and better at making sure that everything's going well. Charlie mentioned that as soon as you see the fire, it's on its way. Most of the time, that's true. Occasionally, we see the fire, and then it goes back out. We just had a launch last year, a Falcon 9 rocket, that they ignited the engines, and then the systems detected an issue, and it shut it right back down, and then they launched a few days later. So that could happen. You probably won't see that from your viewpoint. You won't see the ignition point, but if you're watching it online, it is possible. But again, the computers are making sure that they do that safely. So a couple more pictures I took of a previous mission. This was Transporter 12. This mission that you guys are flying on is Transporter 14. But these were, again, a couple pictures I was able to get of the rocket leaving the pad, and then the pictures on the bottom are actually the stage returning to the launch pad and landing. So as it leaves the pad, the Falcon 9 is producing about 1.7 million pounds of thrust. And less than a minute after liftoff, it's already exceeded the speed of sound. Just after 2.5 minutes, it's already 75 kilometers in altitude and 6,000 kilometers an hour. And the 9 engines on that first stage that you see there in the upper part of the picture shut off. And the top part of the rocket separates, the first and second stage separate, and the single engine on that second stage ignites and begins firing. And about 20 seconds after that happens, it's already reached 110 kilometers, and the top of the rocket will open up and the payload fairings will come off, exposing the satellites and all the payloads to space for the first time. And those will fall away and be recovered in the ocean to be flown again. It's 6 minutes into flight. That second stage is past 10,000 kilometers an hour and is already 300 kilometers in altitude. And then as it shuts down for the first time at about 8.5 minutes, 8 minutes, 45 seconds, somewhere in there, the upper stage is now all the way up to 400 kilometers in altitude, and it's achieved orbit, traveling at 27,000 kilometers an hour. And depending on the desired orbit for those various satellites, they'll start being released various times over the next couple hours. The Perseverance mission payload will remain attached to that second stage, and will then be, as was mentioned, will re-enter and splash down somewhere between Alaska and Hawaii, somewhere close to the ship. For this launch, the first stage is going to be landing on a drone ship that will be parked out off the coast of Baja, California. And about 6 minutes after launch, a couple of those engines will relight, and it'll slow back down as it comes back through the atmosphere. As it comes in, it's going over 5,000 kilometers an hour. It lights those engines for about 30 seconds and cuts that speed in half. And then it gets into the thicker part of the atmosphere, and atmospheric drag really slows it down most of the rest of the way. It gets down to about 4 kilometers in altitude, relights an engine, and then settles down slowly onto the launch pad, or in this case, the drone ship, almost hovering just before it sets down on its landing legs. And if all goes according to plan, it'll look like this sitting on the drone ship out there in the ocean, and they'll bring it back to Long Beach to use it again. Assuming that goes as planned, again, this will be the 465th landing of a Falcon 9 rocket. It'll be the 138th time that SpaceX has landed a rocket on this particular barge or drone ship, which is named, of course, I Still Love You. So that's really just a quick overview of what launch is like on the day of and during the countdown. As a military and a launch veteran, I just wanted to share some of that with you. And although I can't express in words the range of emotions you'll be feeling, I can tell you I still get goosebumps every time I watch a launch. Even if I'm not on console or part of the team, I go out and watch every single one because they're spectacular. They're moving, awe-inspiring, assuming you can see them and we don't have fog. But it is really, truly something special. And so I appreciate having the opportunity to talk a little bit about that today for Charlie and the Celestis team for bringing me out here. And I don't know if I have any time for questions, but
Absolutely, if anyone has questions.
Questions about the launch itself? Yes, sir.
Yes, question that I got hit with by a friend. When the rocket goes up and you do this orbit, do you go with the rotation of the Earth or against the rotation of the Earth?
It depends on where they're trying to put the satellites. So a lot of the flights out of Florida, they launch against the rotation of the Earth. Here from California, normally we're going north-south, but this one will be going a little bit to the west as it departs. So it just kind of depends on where they want those satellites to be placed.
Thank you.
Yes?
I saw where tomorrow is going to be winds up to 30 miles per hour. Is that a consideration whether or not you're launching on the wind speed?
It is. And so there's lots of different wind speed rules or values that we'll be watching for. Some are just to make sure that it doesn't tip the rocket over on the pad or bump into something as it's lifting off. As you saw in the previous presentation, that the contrail being blown back and forth in the winds, as the rocket goes up, it experiences wind shear just like an airplane would. And if you can imagine, 230 feet tall, is if the bottom of the rocket's being pushed one way and the top's being pushed the other way, that's something they have to take into account. So they launch weather balloons, they're watching the weather radar, making sure that all of those loads on the rocket are within tolerance or within the specs. And again, sometimes they'll have to adjust the trajectory a little bit just to get it through the right part of the atmosphere. But yes, they will be watching those winds for both the launch as well as the landing. Yes?
What is the minimum wind gust where you haven't been able to launch? Is it like more than 45 miles per hour, 30 miles per hour?
It really depends. Most of the rockets are, it depends on the direction of the wind, as well as is it a gust or is it a constant kind of wind. So it's really variable depending on whether the rocket's before it's fueled or after it's fueled. A lot of different times during the countdown and during the launch where those numbers change. So there's really not a set number at any one period of time, or that covers the whole span of time, I guess. So. Yes?
Do they carry much extra fuel to accommodate for the wind shear and the wind?
They do, that's part of what they do is run those calculations to make sure that they've got enough fuel to cover those and flying into the headwind or whatever they have to fly into. In order to land a Falcon 9 rocket, they have to keep a little bit of fuel on board to, again, light those engines as it comes back down. So they account for that as well. And there have been launches over the years where they didn't quite get that calculation quite right, and they had a little too much or not quite enough as they got up into orbit. But they're pretty good at that. But that is something that they pay attention to. Yes?
How do they decide where it comes back? Like, why is it a barge as opposed to where it took off from?
There's a couple different things that drive where it's going to land. Some of it has to do with those safety considerations, depending on what the conditions are, which direction it's coming back from. There may be something that we don't want to hazard or put at risk, and so they'll land it out in the ocean versus landing it on land. Part of it, the biggest consideration is how much fuel does it take to get to orbit. It takes a lot more fuel to come back and land on land, and so they can carry a heavier payload if they land it in the ocean. And so as they're doing those calculations to figure out how much fuel do they need, that's typically the reason that they land out in the ocean versus on land.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah.
I got your certificate, I think, over here. So. Andy's a veteran here, so he's probably got a few of these. Thank you, appreciations and submission packages for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Well, we bring you the